Hey lovelies, let's get into today's episode. So the episode started with the ladies' lounge, and Tommy was basically telling the ladies that they have to introduce their new connections to their exes. He basically said, let your ex meet your next. I'm like, I know that's right. So anyways, Jeffrey was like, Tommy, can I hang back and talk to you? So she starts telling Tommy that she's had pretty much two relationships. One was one she dated for 12 years, and the next one was the one she dated for 3 years. And they are both the fathers of her children. So then she's like, the first one, we haven't heard from or seen him in about 6 years. That is crazy. And then the second one basically worked out on her after she had her child with him. He said it was too emotional and he could not do this. So I guess he walked out on her as well. That is very sad. So Tommy was like, you know what, if you cannot bring an ex, then what I would suggest you do is sit down with the guys, the people that you have connections with, and explain everything to them. And I think that's a good idea. I really love how Tommy handled it, to be honest. The next scene, it was Morgan meeting her ex and Tony and Lyndon also meeting the ex. Can I just say that Morgan is a baddie? She has one of the best bodies I've seen in a long time. Like, oh, she looks good. Anyway, let's focus on the episode. So, of course, Lyndon comes in, good energy, gives the ex a handshake, a little bop on the shoulder, whatnot. They were cool. Next thing, Tony walks in with this negative energy. I don't know if anyone caught it, but I was like, your vibe is completely off. So I need to know what has happened to Tony before showing up. But he just seemed really, really cold. Even when Morgan said, hey, honey, or whatever she said, and was trying to like hug him and stuff, he just wasn't really giving her what I would have expected him to give her, which is so weird. So anyways, they all start having conversations. They're all like proper getting into it. The ex basically started talking about how Morgan is a little cray-cray. And so the guys are like trying to find out. I'm like, yes, tell me. So he's like, there was a time he went out with his boys or whatnot. And then he woke up to Morgan, being all up in his hair. And she literally used hair removal cream to remove this guy's hair. His hair was falling off. That is horrible. I really shouldn't laugh, but I can't lie. It cracked me up, but she is nuts. Like, Morgan, no. Toxic is what that is. You're abusive. Like, how are you going to nair someone's hair because you think he was cheating? Even if he was cheating, like, not his hair, for goodness sake. Guys, have you guys ever done anything crazy? And also, do you think Morgan was justified in putting nail on this freaking guy's head? So then the ex was asking them questions. So Lyndon and Tony, like, what would you have done differently? So Lyndon was like, he doesn't have the mental capacity to lie because lies always come back around. And I'm like, do you know what? That's a good point. And then Tony was like, well, he would have communicated it. Like, everything is all about communication. And so Lyndon was like, well, do you know what? If he had done things differently, we wouldn't be here right now. And then Tony was like, I'm sensing that. Like, what are you sensing, Han? Like, you're so in your feelings. He's very much given jealous. And his face even looks redder than usual. Like, his face never looks this red. Like, he's visibly angry. So Morgan was saying in her confessionals that she's seen a red flag with Tony. I'm like, yes, girl, I'm seeing it. Tony is a walking red flag right now. All I see is red. His face is even showing you that it's red, like, seriously, forget about him. And then she's like, Lyndon, they're good, but Tony is red flag. She's seeing red flags. I'm like, girl, run. But I get the impression she's not going to run because she's hella invested in Tony. I think all it would take is for Tony to like sweet talk her and she'll be back into Tony's good graces. So then over in the next scene, Andre walked in. So Cynthia was having a little chit chat with her ex. I'm like, okay, her ex has a head full of hair, honey. Like, I was here for it. So anyways, Andre walks in now with his bun. And the guy made a comment. So Cynthia's ex made a comment about his bun. I'm like, he's saying what we all are thinking. I love it. So then, of course, he's like, oh, so you're Cynthia's ex. And the ex was like, speak up. I can't hear you. I'm like, man, You know you're doing it intentionally, man. Guys are their egos sometimes. It's hilarious. When I tell you that Cynthia's ex was very curt with Andre, like, I am not playing. You guys need to watch it. So he's like, how old are you? Do you have any children? He's like, he's 39. He doesn't have any children. He's like, why is that? I'm like, bro, chill. So he's like, he made poor choices, like, for instance, in women, and that the last woman that he dated was not ready. And then Cynthia's ex is like, how do I know you're telling the truth? I'm like, my guy, it's a fair question, but his energy is quite aggressive. I don't know if you guys pick up on that. Over on the other side, Jeffrey was having a date with Blue and Mark Anthony. So just to explain to them that the exes aren't coming. So, of course, they're sitting down talking about it. And she's like, she's not going to go into too much detail about the 12-year relationship. But basically, bottom line, he's not in their lives. The children haven't seen him. And so Blue was like, okay, what of the latest one, like the recent ex? She's like, when she was pregnant, he pretty much said that he didn't want to be bothered with them, and it was too much for him, so he took a step back. So the person is not in her life either. So then back to Andre and his little tendril. When I say the ex was grilling him, oh my gosh, he sure was. He was like, okay, so how many relationships have you had? He's like, 3 or 4 relationships, serious relationships. He's like, okay, what of the ones that are not serious? And then Andrew was like, flings? And he's like, yeah, like whatever, just tell me. I'm like, okay. So then Anthony walked in, right? So like right there in the heat of it all, okay? And so then Andre is like, I guess Andre forgot what he was talking about before, but Andre is like, oh, I'm very successful in my career. Or maybe he was trying to show off. And that guy was like, I didn't ask that. I'm like, oop. Did you see Cynthia's face? Cynthia looks like, what the hell have I walked into? So the ex is like, I'm asking you about the flings. I want to know about the flings. These are things that Cynthia would want to know anyway. So she's probably going to ask you all these things anyway. And then Andre starts talking about, he's very successful. He's been in Forbes magazine. Like, honey, what's going on? The energy back and forth was not it. It was super heated. I'm like, where is this going to go? And so he's like, but now he's ready. So he's started those companies. He's done really successful stuff for himself. Now he's ready to settle down. And I'm like, fair enough. Like you were chasing your career all the while, and now you want to focus on having a family. That is absolutely fine. You are allowed to do that. You're allowed to do what you want to do. So then the ex faced Anthony. To be honest, I think this is probably my favorite scene this whole episode or this whole season so far. The ex was looking so unbothered, but he was grilling the heck out of the guys. So anyways, Anthony starts talking about the fact that he has a daughter, and then he's like, so why did the relationship work? And then he was like, oh, we focused so much on our daughter and our careers, and we did not really focus on ourselves. And then he was like, okay. So the ex was like, okay, so how many girls have you dated after that? I'm like, okay, he is right there for the juggler. Anthony then said he has only dated one. And then the ex was like, so you only dated one person? And then Anthony was like, yeah, that's all I needed. And then the ex did not seem like he was convinced. It's like, I hear what you're saying, but I think you're not telling me everything. So over on the other side, Jeffrey and Mark Anthony and Blue were on their little date. Jeffrey was telling them about the whole exes situation. So, of course, Blue did not seem like he was convinced. Blue looked like he was like, is this an excuse? Why is she hiding her exes? Is there something there that she does not want to share? And then Mark Anthony seemed a bit more on the supportive side. But Blue just seemed like, something ain't adding up. And I feel like there are a lot of gaps that we need to sort of know about, especially when you're on a reality TV show. When someone doesn't share something, it just sort of gives the impression that there's something to hide, which does not necessarily mean that is true. It's just that's the impression it creates. So back to the heated table, right? So Cynthia's ex starts asking Andre and Anthony as well, what are you guys bringing to the table? And then Andre is like, he's not bringing anything to the table. He can't really say he's bringing anything to the table because at the moment they're trying to get to know each other. And, who knows, he might choose someone else or anything could happen during the process. Cynthia's ex wasn't with it. He was like, I'm not going to let you guys play with her. And then, it got crazy. So Andre was like, I was featured on Forbes magazine. I'm like, Andre, what is your issue with this Forbes magazine? What is it? Like, okay, you were featured, like claps. Okay, wonderful. Now let it go. And Cynthia's ex shot it down. Do you hear me? He said, hell to the no. I don't care if you're featured on Forbes magazine. He didn't say that, but he might as well have said it because he said, I don't care about your credentials. I'm like, oops, oopsie. Andre was not here for it. Andre was like, guys, I got to go. I'm like, okay, yeah, you better go. You better go because you guys will just get into that heated arguments that no one wants to see on national TV, or maybe people want to see, but I don't. But yeah. When Andre walked off, that made room for the conversation with Anthony and the ex to go smoothly. Because I feel like it was almost like, okay, you had that level of aggression with this dude, but with this new dude, you don't have that level of aggression. And so it's like, okay. Also, Anthony's disposition is coming across quite, soft as well, softer. So it's less threatening for this macho man that's his Cynthia's ex, right? So of course then they start talking about like blending families and whatnot. So Cynthia's ex gave an example of if a situation where his daughter wanted 10 items, and Anthony said if his daughter wants 10 items, he will get her the 10 items and then get his daughter, as in Cynthia's ex-daughter, 10 items as well, and also ask his son whether he wants, anything in particular or 10 items as well. And so that's the best way to keep it. Did you notice Cynthia's smile when he said that? Like, she was smiling from ear to ear, man. She was really loving it. So then after giving that impression, Anthony was like, okay, I got to go. So then he's like, no, stay 5 minutes. And then Anthony was like, no, I got to go. But guess what? I'm going to be around. So get my information from Cynthia. I'm like, okay, Anthony, I see what you did there. So then after Anthony and Andre left, Cynthia started having a conversation with her ex about the two guys. So she's like, what do you think about Andre? He's like, I was in Forbes. I'm like, yeah, I think we all picked that up. He didn't like the fact that Andre kept throwing out his credentials. But then at the same time, he also said Anthony was suspect, which we all agree with. And then Cynthia was like, yeah, but he said he's not going anywhere. And the guy is like, yeah, that's game. I am like, yes, Cynthia, you should know better. Like, chill. Moving on to Marcia. So Marcia had a date scheduled with her ex and also Tony and Mr. Blue. So of course she's like, Blue, she doesn't really know where Blue's head is at. Blue is very mysterious. I'm like, I know, right? I feel like Blue has managed to coast all season. Like, no one really knows enough about him, but he still has connections, even though we don't really see much of these connections being shown on the screen. So I don't really know what's going on there. So the ex got into it and was like, okay, what is it about Marcia that captures your attention? So Tony is like, she's smart and intelligent and, she's beautiful as well, basically. And then Blue was like talking about how a lot of women love for him to be the ones to check up on them. But in this instance, sometimes she's the one that actually checks up on him. And then she's like, but you don't know how to receive that. And he's like, yeah, I don't. I'm like, wow. He must have been used to very one-sided relationships. That's what it's giving me. So over on the other side, Mercedes was having a date with her ex, and Anthony and Mark Anthony were meeting the ex. So Anthony starts talking about how they're like yin and yang, opposites and whatnot. And like the things and qualities that he has, she doesn't have it, and vice versa. So it sort of helps with like that balance. And then Mark Anthony starts talking about himself, talking about, he's been working on himself and he wanted to be right for himself first and all of that. Yes, I agree with that, but I feel like that's as a response to whatever was asked just did not seem like the response from the looks of Mercedes and the ex. It was just a bit like, we're asking about this, what are you talking about? Like Mercedes had that cringe look on, and I was like, okay. So over on the other side, Blake and Anthony were meeting Susu's ex. So Susu's ex starts asking about like family and stuff like that, and Anthony was expressing that he's 1 out of 10 kids and he's the oldest, and so family is really important to him and he's really close to his family. So Blake then over on the other side was talking about, he needs to sort of see the family and see if he meshes well with the family, because, it's all about like the synergy and whatnot, and he's not going to, basically, bottom line, is not going to force himself to fit into a family. And if you see the way Sue was cringing, she looked uncomfortable, she looked embarrassed by his response, and I'm like, you know who Blake is, so you have to get used to who he is and how he talks. So then the ex was like, so how do you handle conflict? It's like, oh, I don't do conflicts. I'm like, okay. And then he's like, I think it's all about communication. And I guess he really tried to clean it up, because as soon as I said I don't do conflict, everyone is thinking, what do you mean you don't do conflict? But he definitely cleaned that up a bit, and just expressed like, it was all about communication. And like for him, he would want his partner to feel like they could tell him anything. But if, for instance, they then lie about it, that, that would not be cool, basically. Over on the other side, Mercia's date. So Mercia's ex was trying to find out, like, okay, so who's your first connection, blah, blah, blah. And like, who's your top? And then Blue was like, nah, I ain't got one. I got 2 connections. I'm like, okay, Blue. And then Tony, of course, Tony does this thing where he's like, I think we're at this point where, we have to decipher what is worth. I'm like, hon, was that the answer to the question? Like, you have a way of like swinging your way through things. I know, because I also have that, but yeah, I'm not feeling this, honey. Tony, stop it. Now back to Mercedes and her date. So the ex was like, okay, what sorts of unfavorable qualities or things that do you have, right? So Mark Anthony was like, he can be stubborn and like, just hot-headed when he's made his decision, and headstrong when he's made his decision, blah, blah, blah. Mercedes was looking like, yeah. And then he's like, it can cause a whole host of conflict that he's not ready for. I'm like, okay, if you're not ready for that, then you either change it, or... Because why are you unready for love or ready to love if you're not ready for a relationship, which would also involve conflict resolution? I don't understand. Maybe that was not his intention, but that's what it came across as, and I was not here for it. And then also, so Anthony was saying that the openness to take risk is his problem, and that sometimes, when you don't take a risk, you always wonder like if you could have done things differently. So then after the guys left, Mercedes had a conversation with her ex about like, who would you choose? And then he was like, Mark Anthony, he doesn't really see husband. I think everyone can tell that Mark Anthony ain't ready for anything serious. But anyways, so the ex was then like, in terms of Anthony, it was like, that man is ready for life with whoever it may be. And I'm like, that is correct. I get that vibe as well. So the ex was like, Mark Anthony was forcing the confidence and Anthony had the real confidence. I'm like, that's an interesting assessment. And I couldn't agree more. You know what, Mercedes, this your ex is solid though, because he is giving some really good insights. And compared to all the exes we've seen so far, he seems to be the one with the really good questions and also with all of the insights. So then over on the other side, Susu was having a debrief session with her ex. And so her ex definitely preferred Anthony and said that Blake reminds him of him years ago, 20 years ago. I'm like, wow, so you really do have a type. I don't know when they dated, but interesting that he said 20 years ago. That means, how old is this man? I'm very curious. And at what age they date? Like, I'm very curious about that. And he was like, I'm not convinced that what you're looking for is what he's looking for. And I'm like, yep. We've been trying to tell her this, but she didn't hear it. So then over on the other side, back to Marcia. So they start talking about a date with Tony and Blue. Tony was super assertive, apparently, and would not really put feelings into consideration. That's huge. And on the other side, Blue was very chill, very coy. And then she was like, I wish I could just mash them together. I'm like, girl, I understand. Like, there's so many times when you be talking to multiple people and you like different things about different people. And you're just like, can I push both of you together and then combine you to make one human with this personality? But yeah, nah. Moving on. Jeffrey and Andre had an intimate date. So Andre was cooking and he was trying to make everything so special for Jeffrey. I'm like, okay. He was properly cooking Jamaican food. I'm like, yeah, you better get into it. So then Jeffrey walked in now, they were hugging. He showed her the view, which was lovely. And it just looks like they actually have such a good connection. I'm not going to lie. I'd never seen them together in this way before, but seeing them together, I'm like, yeah, I think Andrea is probably a really good fit for her. I think so far, I don't think Mark Anthony is the one for her, because he's not looking for what she's looking for. And I think Blue is probably not as assertive as she needs. She probably needs a man like Andre, accomplished, can take on, knows what he wants and whatnot, and super masculine or whatnot. I think their personalities probably fit the best, really. The part that made me laugh, this Jeffrey's not serious. Jeffrey is giving me feminine wiles. She's just there just little bites. So he's trying to feed her now. So she's like, oh, little bites. I can't eat all of that. Just a little bit. I'm like, girl, you can eat that. Stop it. But it's funny as hell. She's really working overtime in this charm class, man. There needs to be a course on Jeffrey. It knows how to charm these men. They also shared their first kiss. I was like, okay, first kiss. And then Jeffrey said in her confessionals that what she thinks about after this date is, when can I marry this man? I'm like, okay. I hope he chooses her, because I think they're a really good fit. So then the ladies were at the ladies' lounge and having a chat with Mr. Nephew Uncle Tommy. You guys know I call him whatever I feel like calling, so I decided to call him all of that today, honey. So anyways, he starts asking how did it go? And the girls are telling him how it went. A few people mentioned Anthony came up on top. And then, of course, Morgan was expressing how crazy it was and how Tony was practically mean mugging and stuff because of her putting nail in that poor guy's hair. At least the hair grew, but still, Morgan, no, you can't do that. And also then Cynthia also expressed how the conversation went with the ex and then two new guys, and yeah, the ex just wasn't here for it. So yeah, it was a really good ladies lounge, super entertaining, especially with the Nair story. I cannot lie to you, the Nair story got me going. I'm not gonna lie. So then Jeffrey basically said so far her strongest connections are Mark Anthony and Andre. Andre because he's giving her soulmate vibes. Did you see Cynthia's face when she said that? So then Nephew Tommy's like, who are you not feeling? And so of course Blake comes up again. And then also Blue comes up again. It was interesting that Marcia actually put Blue in her bottom. And the reason she said she did that was because he's had enough time to basically court her and romance her, and he hasn't done any of that, which is fair enough. It's if you're not really putting any effort, then what am I doing here? I think sometimes you find that with all these really calm guys, and yeah, you just feel the romance is not there. I've been in that situation on the receiving end, and I don't like it. I'm very much a uber romance kind of girl. Yes, romance me, please, thank you. So the girls basically decided who is not ready to love, and they chose Blue. Now bear in mind that it was between Blue and Blake, and they managed to choose Blue. Are you serious? Like, that is insane, considering Blake does not really have any connections except Susu. Like, seriously, production is insisting, I think, that he is in there. And he's not doing anything but just causing drama. Like, and this is why they don't really make actual love connections, because like it's too busy being rigged by things like this. And that's why Blake is still there for the drama. He's still there again for another week. And the thing is, Blake is probably going to try and come for Jeffrey next week. Who knows? Oh my gosh, this is just crazy. Anyways, that was the end of the episode. Thank you very much for watching. I thought the episode was really good, and there was the highlight of the episode for me. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought of this episode, and please give this video a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe and tap that bell for notifications so you know every single time that I post. Thank you so much, and I'll see you later. Bye.